the terrible Southport atrocities committed by Axel Radicubana against the 3 young girls, and indeed the other victims who got away with their lives, the narrative that immediately spun around our newspapers, led by figures like Idris Elba, talked about the response to this should be rounding the ends of kitchen knives, as though the knives were the things that had conducted the atrocity. And there seems to be
if I may interrupt you, I mean, the first essay I ever wrote in the City Journal was called "The Knife Went In," because every murderer who had stabbed someone to death and was in prison always described the crime as the knife went in, as if the knife were guiding the hand rather than the hand guiding the knife. It's a very common thing to try and make. I mean, we've all done it. I'm sure we've all done it to an extent. I very much doubt if someone says you behaved badly last night, the first thing that would come into your mind would be excuses.
No doubt about
it. That's normal. The difference is that, generally speaking, on reflection, not immediately, but on reflection, we look back and say, yes, actually, I knew what I was doing, and probably I knew it was wrong at the time, but I did it all the same. And there are some people who never do that, and they're not required to do it because they are actually encouraged to think in that way by all kinds of agencies. So, like, social workers or psychologists or psychiatrists and even lawyers and so on. So, with the case of the Southport case, I've noticed this. I haven't followed it terribly closely, but the little that I have read has not addressed the question, which to me is an obvious one, is whether he took drugs at any time. And you would expect that to be answered. Maybe he never did. I mean, I'm not saying he did, and I'm not saying he did it because he was taking drugs. But in a situation like that, it's such an elementary question, and yet I haven't seen any reports. I haven't followed it very closely. Maybe you have seen reports about that.
I've only seen Peter Hitchens speculating that could be a contributing factor.
Yeah, well, I haven't read Peter Hitchens on that subject, but he's right, and it seems very curious that no one talks about it, given that there have probably now been Encyclopedia Britannicas full of articles about that case, and yet it doesn't seem to be mentioned. And incidentally, there was another case. I don't remember whether the case in Nottingham. Do you remember that? Where
yes.
The chap killed 3 people. One of the young woman killed, her father was a GP, and he drew attention to the fact that no one had tested this man for drugs, even though that man was known to be consorted with drug dealers.
Why do you think that is? Is it because we've become so normalized to drug taking in our society, whether it's cannabis or Class A's?
I think there would be a large number. I can't prove this. Of course, this is all speculation. But I think there are large numbers of people who still attach to the idea that no harm can come from taking drugs because they're still stuck in the 1960s flower-type people. And that has sort of entered the culture, so that, you can take drugs. It's all right for you to take drugs because it doesn't do you any harm. And that is true in probably most cases, just as it is true that most people who drive while drunk get home perfectly safely. The numbers of people who crash while drunk compared with the number of people who drive drunk is small. Nevertheless, it's a large contribution to road deaths. So I mean, it always used to be said, people would say, I always drive a bit better after I've had a drink. They said that. They used to say that. and yeah, I suppose you might even find one or two people of whom that might be true. I don't know. But as a kind of social policy, driving while drunk is not a very good one.
No. You reminded me of all the jokes that used to come out in the Northumbrian pubs that I would frequent growing up, where there's frequently jokes about, don't worry about having another pint, it's 5 and drive around here. Or you'd be playing pool and someone say, he's on his 4th pint and he's really getting into it now. He's got his eye in. So yes, it seems to be a common cultural trait of the people of this country.
Yeah.
Let's stay on the topic of the framing of issues. So we've talked about how we often talk about addiction being a disease, and we strip away the moral agency of those people, the ability to make decisions in their own lives, and how they might have contributed to it. I'd like to turn to how we talk about people's economic situation. So politicians, if you listen to any of their solutions, they're always talking about the needs to lift people up out of some deprived situation, or the reason why things are a problem is it's a deprived area. Whilst the boats might be rising for people, we've got a relative poverty issue, and I think it's fair to say that you don't subscribe to that notion of viewing people in this economic way. And in fact, you say that this is indicative of pauperism. So maybe you can tell us what pauperism is and how it affects us.
Well, pauperism is a condition in which people have to accept what they are given. They or do accept what they're given. And in a sense, the NHS makes us paupers because we don't have any choice in the matter of what we get. And you can see down my doctor's surgery, people queuing up for an appointment. And when they get an appointment, it's like they've been awarded a medal. And it's very difficult to get an appointment. And so this actually, with regard to the medical treatment, it pauperizes them in the sense that they have to accept what they're given and can't really go elsewhere. Now, it is true that they may get very good treatment, but they're still paupers. I mean, it's obviously many people do get very good treatment under the National Health Service. Many people don't, and it's trying to get treatment. Certainly for anything that is not an emergency, is a very unpleasant process in Britain, which it isn't actually so much anyway in France, for example, where they spend about the same on healthcare as we do. So we have pauperized ourselves, and one of the things that has maintained that pauperization is a long lie, which was that the National Health Service was a tremendous achievement. And when we go out and start clapping the NHS, and thank you NHS, you'd think that no other country in the world had any doctors or any medicine or any hospitals or any care of anyone. And furthermore, in this country, before the NHS, there was no healthcare whatsoever either, which is a lie. It's a lie. But it has been successfully insinuated into the minds of the British population.